Hello guys, are you there? Good evening everyone. Welcome to the channel again tonight. Welcome to the channel. Okay, welcome. I can see 4 guys online now. Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome guys, welcome on board. Welcome on board. You can drop your name in the comment if you're there. Welcome to our CSS class tonight. Guys, welcome. We are live for the CSS class. Good evening, Kelvin. You're always on time. I'm sure you've been here since like 9 on the dot. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, who else is there? Let me see you. Zainab, welcome. Zainab, it seems you missed the previous classes, right? Or have you been here so far? You can tell me if you've been here so far or you've missed the previous classes. This is the first time I'm seeing your name. Welcome, Kelvin. Can you help me drop on the Telegram group that we are live so that others can join? Drop it on the Telegram group that we are live tonight. And if you're on the WhatsApp group, help us drop it that you are live. And if you are here, drop your name in the comment box that you are on this channel, ready for tonight. Beasley King, always on time. Welcome, Beasley King. Gift, welcome. We are ready for CSS tonight. If anybody is on our Telegram group, tell them we are live. Let them come online for this class tonight. We're going to be treating CSS entirely tonight. We're going to be looking at CSS and delving into CSS tonight. We're going to just give them like 3 minutes before we... Oh, you missed the last class, right? I thought as much because this is the first time I'm seeing your name. So don't worry, you've not missed so much. The videos are on YouTube, so you can always watch, a replay of the videos for the GitHub class, for the cPanel web hosting class, for which other class that we had now? For the day one yesterday was amazing HTML class. It's amazing class yesterday we had together. We ran through everything HTML yesterday. Collins, welcome, Collins. I see you. We're just going to give the other guys some few minutes to join us, before we kick off tonight. Yeah. So if you're there, I want you to help us trigger the other guys. If you know them, tell them on the group we are live. They should come online so that we can start our class. Yes. Thank you, Kelvin. I can see you on Telegram. Isaac, welcome. Welcome. And how is the how many of you have been able to push your code to the repo? How many of you have been able to push your code to the repo so far? Have you been able to push to the repo your practice classes, anything you've been doing so far? Have you been pushing anything at all? Because after today's class, you're going to have at least something to push, something specific that we're going to ask you to push. Okay, Cosmos. I think I've added Cosmos, Code 20. I think I've added you already. So just try to push now. You should have been added by now. You should have been added already. So this is 907. Let's see if we can get started already. All right, let's see if we can get started. How many of you are with your laptop? Isaac, Collins, Zainab, Gift, Beasley King, are you with your laptop? Are you ready to practice? Yes, Babatunde is online now. We see you. Welcome. Babatunde, we see you. Chooks, you've not been added to the repo. What's your username? You must have been added. Chooks, I guess you dropped your username, I think on Friday or Saturday or so. You must have been added. But you can still Chooks92. Let me confirm that quickly. Give me a second. Let me just confirm that Chooks92. Give me a second to confirm for you. I might need to let me see how to confirm this now. Okay, I think I will do that after this stream so that I don't I don't switch my screen. I will need to switch my screen to actually go to GitHub to confirm that. Yeah, Gift says the laptop is all set. Awesome, awesome, awesome stuff. Awesome. So we are all ready. So let's get started. I think we have 8 persons online now. The rest of them, we're waiting for them. You know, we're usually around 30. We're usually around 19, 20, 30, 40. So let's see. Maybe they will join us up or they will watch the video. So tonight we are looking at CSS. We're looking at CSS tonight. And it's going to be interesting because CSS is all about the aesthetic and the beauty of the website, right? So far we've learned HTML, and HTML is about the skeletal, the layout of the page, right? HTML is about the, it's about the layout of the page, the way the page looks like, the structured, the boxes, the way the sections are defined, the borders, the boundaries of each text and all of that. That's the layout, right? That's the HTML content. But usually HTML all by itself cannot define the aesthetic and the beauty of the website. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and that is the guy that, defines the beauty of the website. So let's get started. Let's get started. I always like leaving this land your dream job as the first thing. I don't know if any of you know why. Land your dream job because, I was still interviewing a guy today, and the guy, I was telling him we should join our team and all of that. And I was telling him, he prefers working remotely. He wants to be in his house and do 20 jobs at the same time. He doesn't want to work full time in any one company. And that's how hot, developers are these days. We are literally looking for developers every day. So if you can learn this skill, definitely I can assure you that you are one of the guys that, everybody will be looking for. So let's get started, right? Let's get started. Let me just switch over my screen to a full screen. So quickly, we're going to be looking at CSS. I'm going to be looking at CSS, right? And CSS, like I said, stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Cascading Style Sheet. And I'm sure some people are on this stream that already knows about CSS before now. They already know about CSS before now, but just behave as if, or just assume that you don't know already. Like I said yesterday, if you already know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you're on this stream tonight, don't turn off, don't run away, don't go offline. Just stay and stick with me. At least I can assure you that you will pick 1 or 2 new nuances here and there. You will pick 1 or 2 new techniques, and style and ways of doing things that is different from what you used to know. So stick with me. So what do you know about CSS before, and what do you hope to achieve with CSS, and how familiar are you with that before? These are some of the things we're going to be looking at tonight. We're going to be looking at what CSS is all about, how CSS works with HTML. We're going to be looking at how to define the different styles, whether you're using external styling, internal styling, whether you're using inline styling. We're going to touch on the different ways that you can style your HTML page. And then we're going to do a lot of examples, right? So we're going to look at divs. We're going to look at the properties of CSS, attributes, selectors, and all of that. So let's dive right straight into it. So we have 15 persons online. Kelvin, I see you. Chooks, I see you guys. Kainde, welcome. Cosmos, Isuru, welcome. I'm sure Zainab and Gift are still there. I love when ladies learn programming. It's just so fantastic because there are not so many. I think we only have 2 of them in our office right now. Currently, we used to have like 4, but 2 of them left. So, when I see ladies learning programming, it's always awesome and amazing. So I want to encourage you, Zainab, Gifts. I think I only see 2 of you online tonight as females. So I want to encourage you guys to stick with this. As a matter of fact, you guys have more opportunities because there are a lot of opportunities for female developers all over the world. So you can literally, work from anywhere globally as a female developer. You have more chances, more opportunities as a very good female developer. So let's dive straight into this tonight, right? What is CSS? I've said before that CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, right? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. And what Cascading Style Sheet simply means is that it's the guide that you use in defining the beauty and the aesthetic of the HTML page, right? So look at examples on the right here. Look at examples of what CSS looks like when you want to start writing one. So for example, we have body here, you have a open curly brace, you have a closed curly brace, and then you have some properties here or a selector. Okay, so this is a selector, this is the property, and this is the value. Let me say that again. So for you to define CSS, you have 3 things involved, right? for any CSS style you are doing, there are three things always involved. The first thing is the selector. The selector in this case is the body. The selector in this case is the container. I will explain to you how you achieve this or how you identify the selectors, right? The selector in this example is the header, and the selector in this example is the footer. We're going to, in the next slide, we're going to look more into what selectors are and how do you, identify selectors. Then inside the selector, in front of the selector is a curly brace, right? A curly brace, and then inside the open and close curly brace is a property, and then a colon, and then a value, right? Let me show you what that looks like, right? Let me just move forward and forward and forward to something around here. Yes. So this is what the structure of a typical CSS looks like, right? The selector is the first thing that you have. And then you have an open curly brace, a closed curly brace, then you have a property, you have a colon, and then you have a value. Then every CSS statement like this or declaration like this, as it were, ends with a semicolon. So the semicolon is what indicates to the browser that this is the end of a particular CSS style. Do you understand that? Are we guys following? So let me explain that again. The structure of any CSS is the selector, then we have a curly brace, a closed curly brace, a property, a colon, and a value. So what is a selector exactly? What is a selector? What is a selector? A selector can either be an HTML tag, right? A selector can be an HTML tag. So yesterday we looked at some HTML tags like paragraph, that's a P. We looked at HTML tags like H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, right? And then we also looked at body. That's the body tag where I told you that all the HTML code was going there, right? We also looked at yesterday, we also looked at HTML tags like forms, like input fields, like input types, checkbox, radio button, and the rest, right? So those are all selectors. So any valid HTML tag is a selector, right? Any valid HTML tag, you can style it with CSS. And how do you do that? So you have a selector first, in this case, body H1, EMP, right? Then you have a certain property and a certain value to style this particular body. So let's move on to what that looks like. So look at examples of properties and values, right? Look at the example of a property here. So in this case, in this example one you have here, you have a selector called body, yes, and then you have a property called background, and then you have a value called purple. So in this case, what we are saying simply is that we want to style the background of this body with a purple color. Let me show you what that looks like. Let me show you what that looks like. So for example, I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code like this. And then let me see if I can bring up one of my screens. Where is that? Okay, let me bring up this, open a new tab. I'm going to drag this to the right so that we can see the two. And then I'm going to do localhost just to launch. So I already taught you how to do this yesterday. So this should not be a new deal. I'm just launching a page, right? A simple page. This is the page here. Nothing is in there, right? Nothing is on this page right now. So let me just style. Let me quickly write my HTML structure so that we can start. Is this too small or big enough? I think it should be big enough, right? Can we all see this? Is my screen big enough? Let me also increase this so that we can see the output. All right. Okay, so I was saying that I want to define quickly my HTML structure. It starts with that HTML tag open, then you have your body tag, and then inside your body tag, that's where you define your HTML content. So I'm going to just define a sample here just to refresh us of yesterday. So we have an header here, right? And I was explaining to you what we just saw was that there was a CSS style that was set to be body. Then in front of the body, let me bring that up. So look at this. In front of the body, we have, let me bump this up a bit just so that I will not be switching on both sides. So, okay. Okay. So we can see here, right? Okay, beautiful. So you can see here, we have the example body. This body has a property called background, and it has a value of purple. So what this CSS is simply saying is that we want to style the body HTML tag with the background property being changed to the value of purple. So let me show you what that looks like. So for example, if I come here to write your CSS style, what you have to do is to define a style tag like this, and inside the style tag, that's where you are going to drop the CSS code, right? Let me say that again. If you want to write your CSS code, you will open a style tag, you will close the style tag, and in between the open and close style tag, that's where you're going to write your CSS code. That is called the on-page styling, right? I'm going to explain the inline styling when we go to the type of styling: inline styling, external styling, and then the internal styling. So this one is internal styling or on the on-page styling. So let me just quickly show you what I mean by body. Then we have the body as the HTML tag. Then you have a curly brace open and close. Then you have an attribute called background. Then you have a colon, and then you have purple, right? So this simply says that you are changing the color of this body. Don't forget that. Let me inspect and show you something quickly. I can't see it clearly. Yes, I can see it. I can't see it clearly. Which one should I go with? Favor, can you see the screen clearly now? Is it clear enough? Favor, can you tell me if you can see the screen? So I'm trying to show you something here. So look at this. So I've just right-click to inspect the page. And what I want to show you by doing that is this. I want you to see, let me, give me a second. Let me do something briefly. I want to pull out this thing so that you can see it, pull it out. All right. So look at this now. Look at this. So there is something called body here, right? This is the page I'm on. There's something called body here. This body is the entire page. As you can see, there is a kind of a color indication representing that this body I'm mousing over is the entire page, right? So that means that if I'm styling the body tag, what I'm literally saying is that I am painting the entire background of the body tag with purple color. So if I save this now, Control S on my keyboard to save, and I refresh this page, you can see that the entire page became purple. Can you see that? You see how amazing that is? So that is an example of CSS, right? So CSS is simply a property and a value that is attached to an HTML tag, or a selector in this case, because we have more than, there are different kinds of selectors. We have the HTML tag that can be selectors. We have what we call the class. We have what we call an ID. We'll get there. But right now, we are only looking at a selector that is an HTML tag. And I've shown you an example of body, right? I've shown you the example of body. I've shown you the example of body, right? Just give me a second. Let me quit my WhatsApp. All right. So that is how it works, right? So I think you have an idea now. So for example, can someone tell me, oh, you can't tell me, this is not a Zoom call. But let me explain what this is, right? So for example, this H1 is another HTML tag, right? And then you have color as the property of CSS that you want to change. And then the value you are assigning to this property is called green. What you're simply saying by this CSS is that you are changing the color of the H1 tags. All the H1 tags on your screen, you are changing their color to green. Is that clear? So you want to change the colors of all your H1 tags to green. That's what this CSS is saying. The same thing applies here. You are changing the font size of all your H2 tags to a large size. From your explanation, a CSS can't stand alone. It must be inputted in an HTML. Not really, not necessarily true. Like I said, there are different ways you can style your HTML, right? There is something called the external style sheet. So you can actually write your CSS to stand alone, even in a separate file all by itself, right? In an external file. We will get there. But right now we are doing the internal styling, which is on the page. And how do you do that? You're going to wrap your CSS within the style like this. You're going to wrap it within the style tags, right? We're going to wrap it within the style tags. So what you'll be learning tonight is actually all these properties. For example, font size. So how do you define, if I want to change the size of a particular element on the screen, what attribute or what property should I change? Font size. If I want to change the color, what do I do? Color is the color property that you'll be talking to. If I want to change the background of my page, what do? I change the background. So these are the properties and the values that you will be studying tonight. Do you understand? So I've just explained to you how you structure your CSS, or how CSS is being applied to the HTML tag. Is that clear? And you can actually apply also more than one CSS style to a particular selector. So in this case now, you can see background purple and color green is being applied to the body tag. That means that all the elements in the body tag will have a background of, or that means that the body selector itself, the body itself, we have the background of purple, and the color of all the text on that body, we have a color of green, right? So let's move on to some more examples. So let me quickly start, showing you how this works. So for example, we have an H1 on the screen with header. So let me come up here. If I want to style this H1 tag and change the color of this header that is currently black to green, for example, or white, let's say white, I will come up here into my style tag. Don't forget, in between the style open and close, that's where I'm going to write my CSS styling. And how do I talk to this H1 tag here? All I need to do is to call it by its name, H1, right? That's the name of the tag, H1. So I'm going to mention the name H1. I'm going to open the curly brace, open and close curly brace, right? And in between those braces, I'm going to write my CSS style. In this case, I'm changing the color to white, right? I'm changing the color to white. That means color and then white. And then I will end my CSS declaration with a semicolon to indicate the end of that particular styling, right? I will press Ctrl S on my keyboard. I will go onto the right side and I will refresh. When I hit this refresh button, voila, you can see that my color just became white. You can see it's very simple and easy. That's CSS. It's actually very easy. So all you will be learning is what property do I need to change to achieve a particular design or a particular style. Do you understand? So for example, we've looked at background, which is this purple here. You can literally change this to anything you want. You can make this orange if you want. You can save, you can refresh, and you get an orange color, right? You can change this from white to red, and then you save, you refresh, you get a red color. Do you understand? So that is CSS for you. So we've learned CSS now, and what we are looking at is that the way to structure your CSS is that you mention the selector you want to style first. You have a curly brace open and close. In between those curly braces, then you specify the property that you want to change and the value of that property. Is that clear? I need you to say in the comments if you're following me and if this is clear enough and it's simple enough so that we can move on to other examples. Drop in the comments if this is clear, if this is simple, if this is easy. Tell me in the comments. I'm waiting for you guys. Favor, Chooks, Shidozie, who else is there? Beasley King. Can you guys tell me if you are following me right now? If you're getting this, let me know in the comments so that we can move ahead. All right. Isaac says, yeah, it is clear. All right, good. So let's move forward. Let's move forward. Let's move forward quickly. So I'm going to move forward. So the next thing you want to look at, like I said, is that what are the properties that you want to change? We have looked at color, we have looked at background, we have looked at what else? Color and background for now, right? So there are times when you have, for example, let me introduce something called classes, right? So there are times that when you want to, say for example, we have several H1s on the screen. This is an H1, I call this Chooks, right? This is Ineka, and then this is Babatunde, right? And this is Kelvin. So you have all these H1s, right? You have all these H1 on the screen, right? Ineka, Chooks, Babatunde, and Kelvin. These are the H1s on the screen, right? And then what we've done so far is that you can see that all 4 H1s, all of them have color red. Why? Because the CSS styling up here says H1 color red. That means that all the H1s will obey my instruction and become red. Why? Because we told all H1s to have a color of red. So how do you segment? It is not clear enough and direct. Oh, it is clear enough and direct. Thank you, Banjotola. All right, so how do you kind of talk to a subset of a particular HTML tag? So for example, I want Nneka to be white. I want Nneka to be white on this, in this list here. How do I isolate only Nneka to be white? That brings us to what we call a class. Or let me explain a class first. So a class is that CSS selector that allows you to style a subset of an element or a subset of a subset of multiple selectors. Let me say it that way. So for example, in this case, we have 4 H1s. They are all selectors. They are all H1s. What if I want to make Nneka and Chooks to have a color of white? How do I do that? The way to do that is to introduce what we call a class. A class is that CSS attribute that allows you to style a subset of elements. So I'm going to call this, let me call this, what do I give this class name? A class can be, you can give it any name, right? So you have an attribute class equals to empty quote. In that empty quote, you will give the class any name you want, but that name is what you will use in styling it, right? So I'm going to call this class, I want me to call it class. No, I don't want to call it class. No, let me call it class whitish. White guy. Let's call it white guy, right? So I'm going to call both Kelvin and Omeka class white guy. If you're not following me, just tell me, just drop a message in the comment box and tell me that you can't understand that. So what I have here is what's happening to my screen. Let me launch my page again. Give me a second. D.html. All right. So if you can see here, we've just named Nneka and Chooks white guy. We gave them a class called white guy. That means that we have now been able to separate Nneka and Chooks from the remaining H1s. There are 4 H1s on the screen, but we've just given Nneka and Chooks the same class name, right? With these class names now, we can then isolate. I can come up here and say H1 with the class name of white guy, right? And then I can give them color white. What I've just done is to use the class name white guy to differentiate these two guys, right? Nneka and Chooks from the rest. That's what I've just done with this class name. So a class is simply any name you give to a particular element to differentiate it from the rest so that you can style it in isolation, right? That's what a class simply is for. But note something here. There is a dot between the H1 and the white guy, right? The dot is actually what indicates that this white guy is a class name. Let me say that again. Anytime you want to style a class in CSS, you will use a dot to represent it, right? Let me say that again for the last time. When you are using a class here, right? If you have given a class to a particular HTML element, then within your CSS, what you will use to identify that class is a dot. So you put a dot behind the class name, and then you can apply the styling. So let me click my Ctrl S on my keyboard, and I'm going to refresh right here, and then you see what happens. Voila. The first two, the guy is bearing white guy. Don't forget that those two guys, we gave them the name white guy, and then the two of them, we told them H1 with the class name white guy have a color of white, and then two of them now are white, and then the rest, my Visual Studio screen is not clear. If I zoom out more than this, I'm not sure you will see my screen, but let me try. I think it should be clear enough, really. Let me just see if I can zoom out a bit more. All right. So I think it should be clear enough now. So can you see it now? I think you should check your internet. If it's not clear, then it's probably your YouTube usually kind of adjusts your streaming quality based on your internet bandwidth, right? So you want to check whether you are on 360. You want to check whether you're on 360. What's it called now? Resolution for YouTube, or you're on 40. Is it 460, 380? I can't remember. 480, 360, I think, or 1080p. Just check the quality of your streaming on YouTube, and if you can bump it up a bit, I think it will be very clear. All right, like I was saying, this is class that we've just handled. We've just handled class, right? Can we just autosave? Yes, we can autosave, but right now I don't have autosave enabled here, right? I don't have autosave. I don't have the extension for autosave enabled here. So I've explained to you the concept of a class. The last thing we want to look at quickly is what we call IDs. So let me explain what an ID. Yes, correct. Nneka says h1 dot white guy is the same as just dot white guy. Correct. Very correct. So you can as well do this. It's the same thing, right? But for those who are new to this, I prefer you do this. I will explain why, in later slides. So the last thing we want to look at here, another selector. I've explained that there are 3 ways you can identify your selectors. The first selectors we have are the literal HTML tags like H1, like body. Then the other selector is a class, right? That's another selector. The last selector is called an ID. And what's an ID? There are situations when you want to just style, you want to give a style to just one item or one element in your code. So anytime you want only one element to have a particular style, then you will give that element an ID so that you can talk to that element alone, right? So for example, I want Kelvin, only Kelvin to be black. I want only Kelvin to be black. Let me just increase this a bit more so that you can have more item on the screen. So I'm going to add more names so that we have more people. So we have, who else do I have here? We have Abiola, and then we have Gift. We have Gift. All right. So here now, we have more items on the screen. They are all H1s. You can see them here, right? Just they are white because and the rest are red. But we want to talk to only one of these elements, and it's Kelvin. We want Kelvin to be black. How do we talk to only Kelvin? Right? We can as well give a new class name to Kelvin. But ideally, if you are using a class, then a class is you use a class when you want to style multiple elements, like a subset of your HTML tags, right? So you use class when you want to style multiple elements. But when you want to style only one element on the screen, then you use an ID. How do you write an ID? It's simple. You write ID equals empty quotes and you give it a name. So I'm going to call this black guy. It can be any name, right? You can call it anything you want. But when you give it an ID, any style you apply to this black guy will only be applied to this Kelvin guy, this H1 tag bearing this ID. Is that clear? So let me go up here. I'm going to come up here. And then the neat thing you need to know now is that don't forget that for class, we use dots. For ID, we will use hash. Then we'll call it black guy, right? Black guy. Then I'm going to say color is black, right? If I refresh this now, I get Kelvin becoming black. So let me explain again, because once you understand this concept of either using an HTML tag as your selector or your class as your selector or your ID as your selector, then you've gotten the foundation. You are lost. Nuruddin says he's lost. Did you just join now, or I'm sure you just joined because you've not been here since the beginning of this class. So maybe you want to watch or play back the video, or you ask specific question instead of saying you are lost, right? So let me continue. So I've explained 3 kinds of selectors. I said you can either style the tags directly, and an example of styling the HTML tags directly. The example of styling the HTML tags directly is body, is H1. These are HTML tags, plain HTML tags. You can style the HTML tags directly, right? But if you want to style some subset of the HTML tags, for example, we identify some 2 guys. You identify some 2 guys that we want to give color white. Here, we identify some 2 guys we want to give color white, right? We use the class name white guy to isolate those 2 guys and give them color white. Then I told you that you use classes for during scenarios where you want to style multiple elements, right? You use classes. But when you want to style only one element, you use an ID. You use an ID. And how do you represent an ID within your style? You will use what we call an hash. So you will see this hash here, H1 hash black guy. Don't worry, when we do multiple examples, you understand the concept. So for now, understand that there are 3 selectors: HTML tag selector, a class selector, or an ID selector, right? That's understandable. So let's move on to the next thing we need to know. All right, so look at this, for example. If you look at this typical web page that we have on the screen, right? Can you see it? Can we all see it? I will use this to quickly explain something. So a typical website, we have something like this. The header part, you have the header right here. You have the menu on the left. You have the main section on the right, and you have a footer right here. right? This is what a typical page will look like of a website. Most websites, you know, they have a menu on the left, the main section on the right, they have a header and a footer, right? But the entire page is actually inside a container. Can you see it? It's inside a container. I'm going to explain something with that. So look at the structure of this page. Can we all see it? Look at the structure of this page. You have a div. We explained a div yesterday, if you remember, during HTML class, right? So look at what they are doing here. So you can see that the structure of the page looks like this. We gave the div an ID of container. We gave the header an ID of header. We gave another div an ID of main, right? We gave the one on the left an ID of menu, and then we have the footer, right? So what you're saying, someone is asking a question. Onyekachi is saying, so if you, I can't read what you're saying, but if I guess what you're saying is that if you use the black guy on another element, it wouldn't work. Yes, it will work, but it's not advisable to do that because by design, IDs are meant for targeting only one element on the screen. But when you replicate it, it will work actually. In CSS, it will work, but you will have issues with JavaScript. So if you give these two or several elements the same ID, and you're trying to use JavaScript to talk to those IDs, then you're going to run into an issue because it will only pick the first element that has the, it will find the first element with that ID and address it. So let's say you want to do document.get element by ID, right? We're not there yet, but just to answer Oyedikachi, right? So in CSS, technically it will answer you, right? You can style multiple elements with ID, it will work, but it's not the right thing to do. If you want to style multiple elements, you know, you use a class name, not an ID. You use a class name. When you want to style multiple elements, you want multiple elements to share the same styling, you use a class name. If you want to style just one element on the screen, you use an ID. That is the rule. That is the principle, right? Can we move ahead? So I was explaining something on this screen, right? That this is the structure of this page that you just saw here. This is the structure of the page. So let's do this together quickly. I'm going to do something together. So look at this now. They've broken down this page based on this HTML layout. They've given it these attributes, right? We have the container with a property and value. We have the menu, property and value. We have the main, the property and value. We have the footer, property and value, right? So what are the property and value that we want to attach to these things? So let's look at this. Maybe I should do an example, right? See what I want to do with you. I think that will be clearer if I, let me see how I'm going to do this so that I want you guys to get this, because if you don't get this, it will be very painful. So I want to get this. I'm looking at the simplest way to break it down for you to understand this simple concept, right? So let me take an example of a page. But before I take an example, let me just run through the different properties and styles that you have. I've explained color. Anytime you want to change the color of an element, you use the color property, right? For example, you can see here color. Am I the only one that's experiencing this? No video again from my end. I think you are the only one experiencing that, but others can confirm if they are still seeing my video, because I can still see video here. Anybody still seeing the video? Can you confirm you are still seeing the video, please, everyone? I'm waiting for you guys. Tell me if you can still see my screen so that I can move ahead. Tell me if the screen is still showing, if it's clear, if I'm audible, and we're live. Guys, are you there? I need comments. I need comments. I need comments. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys see me? All right, so you guys can see me. Thank you, praise order. Thank you. Yeah. So as I was explaining, let me run you through the properties and the values that are available in CSS. Then we will now do a practical example right now that will explain how to apply these things so that you can understand what I'm saying. So I've explained to you that there is background color to change colors to the background color of a page, right? And then there are other properties. So let me just quickly run you through an example. So let's go and practice. Let's go and practice. So what I'm going to do is I want to design something. I want to design, look at this. Can you see this page you're seeing here? I want to quickly design this. And I want it to look exactly like this, right? So see what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay out the page. So I'm going to remove all of this. I'm going to remove all of that. And then I'm going to define a div. Somebody is asking that it didn't follow clearly yesterday what a div. What's a div, right? A div is simply a container. So for example, if you see this outer box, in fact, all these boxes, the one with the very thick red line is a div, is a container, right? Inside this outer container, we have the header, the content, and the footer. So this container is a div, right? Then this header is another div. Then this content is also a div. The footer is also a div. So divs are just boxes. You can see them as boxes. You can see them as containers, right? Those are divs. So I told you that I want to show you a practical example of this simple design that we are seeing here. Let's do this design together. Let's design this on our page and see how we can achieve this, right? So the first thing I want to do is to lay out this structure with HTML. So I'm going to have a div. The very first container outside, the one with the thick red line, is the main div, is the outer content, is the main div, right? Then the one here inside, the one that borders around the header, is another box, is another div. The content is another div, and the footer is another div. So let me lay that out in HTML. So I'm going to define this main div, right? And I'm going to give it an ID, calling it the container. Don't forget that your ID can be any name, your class can be any name, right? You can give it any name you want. So I'm going to call this div right here. Look at it. This div, the one with the thick red line, I'm giving it a name, the ID container. Are you guys following me? Right? So inside that container, we have three sections. We have the header, the content, and the footer. So look at it. So I'm going to define three divs inside the container now. So the first div, I'm going to call it the header, right? That's the first div. I'm going to define another div, right? Inside that div, I'm going to give it an ID of, what's it called now? An ID of content, right? An ID of content. And then I'm going to define the third div. Don't be lost, please. Don't be lost, follow me. Class. And then I'm going to call the third div footer, right? I'm going to call the third div footer, right? So we have three divs on screen now. We have three divs on screen. All the three divs, they are inside the container. You can see the container here, just similarly to what we have here. So the red line, the red box, this one, this main tick box outside is the container, right? And the container is made up of the first container or the first div, which is the header, the middle div, which is the content, and the last div, which is the footer. Is that clear? We have three boxes inside the container. So that's what I've laid out in HTML here. So we have a div, which is the main outside container. We have another div, which is the header, the content, and the footer. So what we want to do first, let me just save this and refresh so that you get a sense of what we have. Right now, you won't see anything on the screen because it's actually empty, right? So we are still in our orange color because we styled something here as orange, the body background. So I'm going to change this back to, what's the color of our body background? It's white. You can see that the body background is white, right? So I'm going to change that back to white. So I'm going to refresh now. When I refresh, I'm going to get that the body, like I said before, the body is actually the entire page, right? The body is the entire page. The entire page is the body, right? So we've changed that back to white. So let's start with this thing. Let's start with this first box. The first box is here, and it has a border of red, and it's very thick. The CSS property for giving a border is called border. Look at it right here. It's called border. And then when you apply the CSS border to any element on the page, you can apply a value of 1 pixel, 2 pixel, 3 pixel, depending on the thickness of your border. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to go to this container, which is an ID. I will scroll up to the section above here. Then I told you that when you want to style an ID, you use the word hash. When you want to style a class, you use the character dot, right? So assuming the name of this div, we gave it a class. Assuming this was to be a class, then we will use a dot, right? We will use a dot container up here where we are styling. Is that correct? Do you remember that? But anytime we use an ID, then when we are styling, we use, can these things just leave my screen? All right, so when you are using an ID, you will use hash. Is that clear? So the hash represents the ID, while the dot represents the class. Let me say that again. The hash represents ID, while the dot represents a class. So in our case here, what we are doing is an ID. So I'm going to switch this to hash, right? So now we can control this particular div, we can style it. So what I'm going to do is that we need a box on the screen that looks exactly like this. What we want is this big box with this thick border, and the color is like red, and it's this big. So what I'm going to do is to say, I'm going to give the box first. I'm going to define the box width as say 500 pixel. I'm going to define the height as 500 pixel, right? And I'm going to define the border as 2 pixel, which is very thick and solid, and then red. We explain all the things I just wrote. I'm going to explain to you shortly. So let me show you that first. Container. Oh, sorry, I used red and an hash. That's not correct. So I'm going to refresh that. So you can see that. I don't know if you can see this, but let me reduce the width a bit so that you can see it. Let me use like 200 so you can see the box. All right, so you can see the box on the screen, right? So that is the box. Let me reduce the height so that you can see the full box, like 300. Let me make it 200. I want you to just see the full box on the screen. All right, great. So can you see the box? Is there a major difference between, someone is asking a question, is there a major difference between background and background color? Yes, so there is a difference, not like a major difference, there's a difference, right? So there are some CSS properties, right, that can, they have like the parents way, or they have like the, let me call it the parent styling, where the model of doing them, you can use their parent style. So for example, you have something called background. When you define background as a style, right, it allows you to define multiple values at the same time. You can define this, whether it's solid, whether there is no repeat. You know, for those that are not advanced yet, this might confuse them a bit. But just to answer Kende, when you use background, simply when you use background, it allows you to specify multiple values at the same time. But when you use background color, right, when you use background color like this, then you are allowed to only specify color in front of that. You cannot specify anything aside the color, because now you've narrowed it down to only color. You've gone to background color. But with just background, it allows you to specify the color, the size, the width, no repeats, you know, the shade, you know, gradients, and a whole lot of more items, right? So you can specify a whole lot of values when you use background. The same thing applies for padding. It allows you to specify multiple dimensions of the padding. The same thing applies to margin and all of that, but I don't want to get there. I don't want to get ahead of myself because of people that are just, you know, that are just learning this. So let's just take it one step at a time. So I was explaining the box, right? Don't forget that what we're trying to learn here is these different CSS properties and their possible values. So we are saying width here. What is width? Width is simply the CSS attribute or property that you use in defining the width of an element. So what we are saying simply here on the screen is that we are saying this container should have a width of 200 pixels. And you can see on the screen here, from here to here is 200 pixels, right? Then we told the container to have an height of 200 pixels also. From the top here to the bottom is also 200 pixels, right? Then you have a border. The border, we said the border should be 2 pixels, a solid thickness, and a red color. You can see it here. It's 2 pixels. If I can increase this, let me give it 10 pixels. If I give it 10 pixels, see what happens. You can see that. So that's 10 pixels. 10 pixels is very thick. So that is the work or the function of this number here. It increases the thickness of the box. That's border for you. This second attribute here, you can call it dash, right? If you call it dash and I refresh, you see what happens? Can you see that? So that is, an example of a CSS value. Then the color here, you can as well change it to anything you want. I can make it black, and I refresh, and it becomes black. Can you see it's exciting? So what you are learning really is the possible values that these different CSS properties can have. So we've looked at color, we've looked at background color, we've looked at width, we've looked at height, we've looked at border. Is that okay? So let's move on to the next thing. So look at the example we're following. So now we have, let me return this back to this, this box. So we're trying to mimic this box here. And this box is not dashed, it's solid. So I'm going to return this back to the way it was before, just that we achieve that objective. So I'm going to make it solid. I'm going to make it solid. I'm going to make it red. This thing should leave my screen. Can you go back? I'm going to, shit. Because my screen is too enlarged, so I'm getting a lot of pop-ups. Yeah, so I'm going to take this back to red, and then I'm going to make it 2 pixels, because that's exactly what we want to achieve based on our example that we are following. So this is what it looks like. So the next thing we want to do, just for learning sake, right, is that inside this container that has a border of red, we have a section or a box here called header. We have a box here called header, right? Let's define this. Let's write this statement, div id header, and give it this box. So see what I'm going to do to achieve that. Inside this box, I'll just put in the content there. I'll just call it header, right? And then let me refresh so that we can get that. You can see the header right here. So let's style it for it to look like this, so that we can learn more CSS property and style. So we want it to be centralized like this. We want it to be centralized like this. So the first thing I'm going to do, see the div that is holding this header is called ID header, right? So I'm going to come up here. Because it's an ID, I'm going to use an hash, right? And the name of that ID is header. So that means I'm going to start with hash header, and then I'm going to define my curly brace, right? So the first style I want to teach you now, to centralize any item on screen. When you want to centralize any item on the screen, especially when it's a test, you use a property called Test Align. You use a property called Test Align. So let me recap again. We've looked at color, background color, width, height, border. Now we are learning Test Align. So you can use Test Align to centralize a particular element on the screen. So see the way this item here will jump to the center when I refresh. Okay, it didn't jump to the center. Let me see why. Okay, I need to give a width to it so that it can know the dimension it needs to go. So I'm going to give a width of 100% to this box so that the div header can move, can be wide enough like the parent. Let me see. It's not still moving. Let's see why. So I'm going to inspect now to just see why it's not moving. Let's see why it's not moving. So we have a div here. Test align. Is the spelling not correct? Okay, I think it's the quote that I put in there. I see. So let me just remove the quotes and then it should work. All right. So what is the difference between percentage and px? What is the difference between percentage and px? Fantastic question. Fantastic question from Banjo Tola. All right, so what's the difference between percentage and px, right? The difference is simple, right? When you use px, you are actually specifying the actual pixels on the screen. So your screen is made up of pixels, right? So how do I explain this so that it's clear? So your screen, if you remember that your screen is made up of a resolution, if you have gone to your resolution of your desktop before, your display, if you go to your system settings, display, you will see your system resolution. It could be 1240 by 1080p. It could be 760 by something. So your screen has the resolution, right? So when you are specifying your dimensions in pixel, in px, then you are actually specifying, the exact pixels that they should occupy on the screen. That is good for some situations. But when you are defining, when you are building for responsiveness, because when you define something as 200 pixels and you open that website on a mobile phone, it will still try to occupy 200 pixels. whether on the web screen or mobile screen, a tablet, which irrespective of the screen, it should always be 200 pixels. That's the disadvantage of using pixels, right? But when you use percentage is like you're saying it should calculate based on the fraction of the screen. For example, I said this guy, let me do something here so that you can see what I'm saying. I'm going to give this guy a background of, let me give this guy a background of, say, black, for example, just to explain and illustrate what I'm explaining so that it's clear. So I've given this header the background of black. Can you see that? Then I'm going to give the color to be white so that we can see the text inside the black background. Good. So you can see this. I want to explain something. Right now, the width is 100%, right? So that means it stretches from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. That is 100%. When I specify it to be 90 or 80%, it's going to occupy just that percentage of the screen. Can we see that? So that's the difference. So percentage is just a fraction of the screen, right? Why pixel is more like specifying the exact pixels that it should occupy on the screen. Which is better? The question, which is better? Depending on the element you are talking to, and then whether you are addressing responsiveness or not. That is the answer to that. Which is better? None is better than the other. It only depends whether you are building for responsiveness or not. So if you are building for responsiveness, then you can use percentage for your divs, and you can use REM for your font sizes and stuff like that. But you know, on the general overall, they advise that you don't use pixels because it's not so responsive, right? So let's move on because of time. So I'm going to return this back to 100 pixel, 100%. Then look at what we are following. We have a space. Can you see a space between this box, this header, and this container? There is a white space in between the two of them. How do we achieve that? How do we achieve the space between this box, the header box, and the container with the red line? How do we put a space in there? There is a CSS property called margin. There's a CSS property called margin. In this case, we can see margin bottom, right? I'm going to explain to you. So but what we want to put here right now is a margin. So, but I wish I could see something that exactly, this is what I'm looking for. So the space between, see something. The space between, yeah, correct, Ineka, EM. The space between a box, the content of a container and the container is called padding. Let me say that again. The space between the content of a container and its border, right? The space between the content of a container and its border. Look at the border line here. It's a white border here. The space between the border and the content of a container is called padding. And the space between a container or the border and another container is called margin. Let me show you that in actual reality. So what I'm going to do to show you that is that we have the header here. We've styled the header. I've made it 100%. I'm going to quickly style the content. So I'm going to put something here called content, right? That's the content. So let me refresh so that you can see the content. So you see the content here, right? So let's start styling the content. So it's an ID. So I'm going to use an hash. And then we have content. So I'm going to start with Test Align, right? So that we can centralize the content there. So this content now is going to jump to the center. Can we see that? What made it jump to the center is because of this Test Align here. The next thing we want to do is to give it a background color of its own. You know, I'm going to give it a background color of gray. Is that the spelling of gray? I think it's G-R-E-Y. Yeah, of gray. And we see that, right? The next thing we want to do now, I want to now explain the concept of margin and padding to you. I want to explain padding and margin to you. So the space, so this is the content, right? See this gray area, that is the content. Let me introduce a border so that I can use border to explain. So I'm going to introduce a border to the content. 2 pixel, solid, and is I'm going to make you let me say yellow so that it will be clear enough for you to understand. We're almost done with this class. So look at it. So we've introduced a padding, right? So look at this now. Let me explain again. So the gray, this gray area is the content, right? The yellow line is the border. right? And then this red outer line is the container. The space between the content and its own border is called padding. So let me introduce a padding so that you see that. So I'm going to come up here, and then I'm going to introduce a padding. Padding 10 pixel, right? Let me refresh and see what you get. Oh, it's not visible. How do you see it? How do you see it so that it can be visible? Let me inspect so that you can see what I'm showing you. Though the padding is there, but you can't see. But look at what it looks like. Can you see something? Can you see the yellow line around the content? So you see a blue line, right? You see a blue line. You see a yellow line, and then you see the border, the main yellow line. So that blue bar, right? That blue bar is the content. The yellow bar around it. I don't have a pen here to mark on this screen. So the yellow bar around the content is the padding. Let me increase it so that you can just see that, right? For the sake of those who are new to this, I'm going to put my cursor here. So see how the yellow bar is reducing as I reduce the number of the padding. So now padding is 0, and the yellow line, the yellow bar is completely gone. That's the space between the content and the container. Can you see this? You can see the space is increasing as I'm increasing the padding, right? So that's the space between the content and the container. Then let me introduce margin. Margin is the space between the border and the outer container. So let me introduce margin so that you see that also. I'm going to call it 10 pixel. I'm going to refresh. All right, see this now. Let me inspect again so that you can see clearly what I'm doing. So look at this content, still at that content. You can see that now we have like 4 boxes. There is a blue bar, which is the actual content. There is a yellow bar, which is the padding. There is a yellow border, which is that line around it, which is yellow. Let me change the color of the yellow border so that I will not be saying yellow twice. I'm going to give this, what color is, let me call it black, right? So let me use that to explain. So I'm going to refresh so that we see that. Beautiful. So let me inspect again so that I can explain again in a clear terms. We're almost done, don't worry. So look at this again now. So we have the blue bar, which is the content. We have the yellow bar following the blue bar is the padding. We have the black line. The black line is the border. Then we have a white space surrounding the black border, right? That is the margin. The margin is the space between the border, which is black, and the red external container. Is that clear? So I think you will get it with time. If you don't still get it with that explanation, you get it with time, right? So let me add a margin to the header too. Look at up here. This is the header styling. And then I'm going to drop a margin. I want comments, please, guys. I can see a lot of you online, but I need comments to be sure you are following me. Can you guys drop comments to be sure that you are following me, right? Can you guys tell me you are following me? So I've added a margin of 10 pixels to the header, and you can see that it has shifted, right? We have a margin of 10 pixels on the header. We have a margin of 10 pixels on the content. Can you see that we are getting close to that, our guide here? So you can see the space here. The space here is the margin, and the space inside is the padding. The space inside is the padding. The space outside is the margin. Maybe that's clear, right? So we've achieved these 2 boxes. The last boxes is similar. It's very similar to what we have already. So you just define the last box, which is the footer, and the style it. Okay, I think I changed this to a class. I'll make it an ID, and then I'll come up here, and then I will style it. Sorry, I'm going to call it an hash. I'm going to call it a footer, and I'll be able to style that. So the last thing we want to do here is I have not put any content. I've not dropped any content that can make us see the footer. So I'll just put a content here called footer. I'm going to refresh this. I will get a footer. Then we can go up there and style the footer the way we want it. All right, everybody's following. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for following. So I'm going to drop Test Align. Test Align as center, right? I'm going to refresh so that you see the text jump to the center, right? Then we're going to add, let's see what that looks like here. It's just still a line and then a box. So I'm going to add a border, right? I'm going to put a border there. of 1 pixel solid, and then maybe black also. And then I'm going to add a margin. Margin is the spacing around the element outside, on the outside. So when I refresh this now, I will get this, right? So we can see we have something similar to what we have here. So that is an example of CSS. It's just an example, right? So that you can just master or see more of these items: margin, border, text align, and all of that. So let me now open a sheet that contains everything that you need to know in CSS, so that will give you an idea of what we need to do what. So I will just run through that cheat sheet and then we wrap up the class for today. Where is it again? All right. I'm going to maximize my screen and then I'm going to zoom out a bit. So this thing just gives us a breakdown of everything that we can ever style in CSS, right? So look at it. So I talked about, somebody was asking what's the difference between background and background color the other time. And I explained that there are 2 ways you can use it. When you use background, you have the option of specifying all the children or all the multiple values that background can take. So this explains that to you. So you can see on the screen, if you use background directly, then it's possible for you to specify the background image, the background position. That's in one call, by just using background only. In front of that background, you can specify all these values, right? And it's also possible to specify individual elements like this. Do you understand? So that's for background. Then how do you specify background image? Background image is, specified this way. Background image. Let me show you an example of that. Let me show you how to do that. So if you want to put in a background image here, let me reduce this so that you can go back to our code side. Just to explain background image, just to show you an example of a background image. If you want to drop background image on this page, right, what you need to do is simply to come to, say for example, we want to put a background image on the body, right, on the body tag. Where's the body? So all you need to do is to specify the URL of your background, and then in brackets you can specify the path to the image inside this place. So let's try to grab an image from online. It will sync eventually. I like that spirit, Kelvin. It will actually sync eventually. If you are seeing CSS for the first time and you're not getting it, it's very normal. Very, very normal. Very, very okay for you not to get it the first time. But just keep following and don't give up. I'm very sure that by tomorrow, it will get easier. Next tomorrow, it will be easier. Like that. And then by tomorrow, we'll be doing something more interesting than this. This one, I'm just showing you the properties and the values. But by tomorrow, we'll be looking at something very interesting like the Google page, for example. Maybe we'll start with the Google landing page tomorrow, and then you will understand better, right? So let me just grab an image, from the web. I'm using a background image right there. I just want to explain how to use the background image. So I'm just going to click on this, and then I'm going to right-click and copy the image address. Yeah, I'm going to share that. So I'm going to drop the image here. This is not the right image I'm looking for. That's too... let me just see background, image background. Okay, let me grab something like this. Copy image address. No. That's not what I said you should do. Give me a second. Trying to grab that image. All right, so I'm going to copy the image address. I'm going to come back here, paste it. I expect a PNG. Yeah, this should work. All right, so I'm going to go back to my page. I'm going to drag this back so that you can see it. Then I'm going to come back here and refresh this page. Where is my page? Where is my page? Where is my page? Come back here. Okay. All right, so can you see the background image in the background? Right? So that's how to do that's how to add background image, right? So let's go back to the sheet that we have. So that's to do background image, right? So there are a lot more that you can do. So we'll be going through. You can't know everything, right? You can't know everything at once. You can't know everything at once. So It's based on what you need. So for example, you see a design. So let's say we go to a site. Let me open a site. You're now wondering, oh, how do I add this thing? How do I achieve this in CSS? Since you already know the concept that all you need is a selector, whether the HTML tag, whether the HTML tag or the class or the ID, then how do you achieve anything? It's simply based on, it's simply based on, say for example, you are looking at this design. Okay, this is a mobile app, for example. Let me see if I can get a website. Okay, look at this website, for example, right? That is loading on your screen. Look at this website. If you want to analyze the design of this website, and you're asking yourself, what kind of CSS do I need to achieve this? You can simply know that, okay, here I have a color of black, I have a color of orange, I have a border radius on this button, I have a background color of orange, I have a color of white for the text. You can analyze it like that. So, and if you see something that is strange, that you cannot really achieve, all you need to go to your cheat sheets and check it out. Is it a border radius I need? Is it a background color I need? Is it this I need? Is it that? What do I need to achieve this particular design or this particular style? How do I achieve this kind of line, for example? How do I achieve this kind of line or this dash? So that's it. So you don't need to master or cram all the CSS styles. All you need to know is the basic example or the basic principle and the structure, the way I've explained it to you right now. So once you understand the structure, all you need to know is that when I need to achieve something, I need to just go online and check it, and then I will achieve that thing. Any question? That will be all for tonight, so that I don't get too much into, especially for those who are just seeing this for the first time, so it's not too much for them. So like I said, this is the first time you are seeing CSS. Don't shy away from it. It will sink in. You will know it within the next 1 week. I can assure you that you will be designing this by yourself, and it will be very easy. So tomorrow, when you come back again, you will see more of this. We will take more examples, and it will become easier. Next tomorrow, another example, it will become a lot easier. And then we will now give you an assignment for you to go and practice on your own, right? And then by the time you start practicing on your own, then it will become a lot easier. So any questions for tonight as we wrap up for today? So that's the introduction to CSS. We have just taken the introductory class to CSS. There are going to be a lot more classes on CSS for tomorrow, next tomorrow. So with combination of HTML skills and CSS skills, we will be able to design the Google landing page. So this is what you're going to be designing. Let me just quickly start showing you that now. So this google.com that you see here is what we are going to design tomorrow, right? This is what you're going to design tomorrow. And I want to throw a challenge out there for those who already know CSS, right? What I want to do for those who already know CSS, like Nneka, I believe Nneka knows CSS already. I believe some other guys there already know CSS. So I want you to, before tomorrow's class, to design this Google landing page for me, right? If you can push it to the repo, that would be awesome. If you can't push it to the repo, you can just upload, you can just send it to me, anyhow you want to send it to me. You can send it to me on Telegram privately or something. But let me challenge you to design this page before tomorrow's class. For as many of you that know CSS already, try this out, design this page for me and get it out. So tomorrow we'll be designing this page together, and it will help you to learn a whole lot more CSS classes and properties. Is that fine? Any questions? Tell me in the comment box if you enjoyed this class for tonight, so that we can end this class now. I want to hear from you guys in the comment box. Tell me if you really enjoyed this class, right? Tell me if you really enjoyed this class. Yes, you can push it to the Bootcamp 101 class, right? You can push it to the Bootcamp 101 class. So I'm going to just drop this in the group, and then we can wrap up the class for tonight. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for staying tuned till now. The challenge for tomorrow is to design that Google landing page before tomorrow. If you already know CSS, if you don't know CSS, wait for tomorrow's class. We are going to design this together, and we're going to have fun doing it. Thank you very much. That is the end of this class for today. See you guys tomorrow.